Hey guys, so they officially released the next format after Regression H, and we are going back to Regression Set F. So I thought for today's video, it would be a good idea to go over some of the best teams the last time we had it 2 years ago. Regression F was an interesting format, right? Um, it's not loved by many like me, but it's also loved by, I think, a lot of other people because the diversity of the team was of the teams were interesting because Raging Bolt was very dominant, but we did have a few things that won, like Articuno, Gouging Fire, and such. And I think going back in this format, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, and I'll give it another chance before I judge it too harshly, because I think that there is definitely ways this format can still, we can innovate on it, just like we did with the previous Reg G and Reg H reruns. Let's just start with Wolfe Charlotte regional team. So why am I starting with Wolfe's team? Well, one, it's good for the thumbnail, and two, this team actually won two regionals. So obviously, Wolfe won the Charlotte regionals, which is the first run for Region F for North America, and then the regional after that in Liverpool, Antonio actually won the exact same six, no changes. And these were his EVs from Wolfe's video after he made a video on this after he won, right? And it's a relatively standard-ish team, but with a lot of different tech pieces. Like, you see Instant Rillaboom, right? These are very standard for their move sets and such, and Urshifu is also a very common choice scarf. But the other free Pokemon, I think, is where it gets really odd. The Furgraph here is Fruit Spray with Trick Room. The Flutter Mane is Calm Mind, which is unorthodox for Flutter Mane for the most part, and Ogerpon is Swords Dance. So it's a balanced team with a twist, but I think what makes it really strong is how it enables to set up sweepers really, really well. So first of all, I think the Swords Dance Ogerpon is by far one of the strongest pieces on his team. Ogerpon Heartflame was introduced actually in his regulation, and it became kind of a menace, right? It is just very oppressive. Fire and Grass typing is actually really good, as you're not weak to water, and the grass is able to like hit the things that fire can't really hit, right? It's like a Jose Water types, like I mentioned. And fire typing with the Ivy Cudgel and in the Terra boost, you get that +1, and Ivy Cudgel starts like destroying everything, right? Pair that with Swords Dance, so you have the +1, +2/+2, right? And then you will literally kill everything after one Swords Dance plus Terra. So this thing is a really, really, really strong, and it's paired really well next to Incineroar support for Intimidate plus Fake Out, and of course the Rillaboom synergy for double Fake Out, and also giving Ogerpon that Grassy Glide priority, right? So it makes this a very potent setup sweeper, and just the support of Instant Real supports it really, really well. Scarf Ursh, nothing really like much to talk about on it, but what I really like about Scarf Urshifu on Wolf's team is it pairs really nicely with Furgraph. I think Urshifu in this format without Protect does struggle against like Fake Out, and the new addition of Raging Bolt Thunderclap completely destroys Urshifu, as you can see, it's Terra Water here, right? So Furgraph preventing priority overall allows us Urshifu to kind of sweep through teams and actually click the moves it wants to without failing to move, right? Flutter Mane here, also very unorthodox sets, but it makes sense for what he wants it to do. So he mentioned that the Calm Mind Terra Grass set was his way to beat Archer on Rain. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to break because there's a lot of physical attackers which you proc stamina on. Ogerpon is also not very good versus Arch in Rain, as they have Rain to neuter the agricultural damage, and you only really have Urshifu plus Fluttermane to really hit it, right? And Fluttermane with Terra Grass and a few Calm Minds can basically just like resist electro shots and Flash Cannon KO. And even with AV, our special defense is still not very high, so you outpace it with Calm Mind. So that set's pretty cool. It's very matchup dependent, but for what the team needs, I think it's really good because the rest of the team is very physical, so having a strong special sweeper is really valuable. And that's sort of the same logic with this Furgrass set, where I mentioned a lot earlier how Armor Tail is a very good ability to support the team, it's also a really potent setup sweeper. This Furgraph here gives Wolfe a Trick Room option, as he doesn't really a lot of fast modes, but he doesn't really have any great force speed control outside the priority and such. So if he's facing like a faster paced team, like we saw this in his finals actually versus Nicholas Donnelly at Charlotte, facing a tailwind offense team, Furgraph being able to reverse the speed order is very, very good. And it also allows you to hit hard in Trick Room, because I think one of Furgraph's biggest issues is that if you're running the Helping Hand Trick Room Psychic Dazzling set, it's really passive in a sense, right? So it's basically just data click Trick Room and click Helping Hand spam, but this Furgraph's actually a threat, right? After you get Throat Spray up, after the Hyper Voice, you actually do respectable damage with 156 special attack here. And like, yeah, this is gonna have 110 base special attack. It's a really nice psychic who does a lot of damage into a lot of different things like UK or Urshifu. And also one thing to mention is Terra Fairy. You just wall out Raging Bolt because Raging Bolt can only hit you with Thunderclap, which is Calm Mindset, right? Which Armor Tail blocks. And with Terra Fairy, you're immune to Dragon Pulse. So that's also a pretty cool fact of this Flutter Mane for Graph, that fairy. And in Cirilla, not really a whole lot to talk about, just that fact that they support the team really well. I guess the only thing to really talk about is the Cirilla Terra Poison. I think Terra Poison's pretty cool. It gives you a fairy resist, a fighting resist. Those are kind of the main ones. But yeah, Wolfe's team, it came out in the start of Regulation F, and it won 2 regionals, so I think it fits this list perfectly. Next up again. Oh, who's this again? Oh, Wolfe. Yeah, Wolfe. We got to feature Wolfe again because he won the very last Reg F regional in Orlando. He top 16 EUIC with this team. And not just that, this team also won Perf regionals. So Wolfe made 2 Reg F teams that won 2 different events with both different teams. So 4 wins for Wolfe Glick, basically, those teams. He made 4 winning teams, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. That's a crazy stat. But anyways, it's a little bit similar to a Charlotte team. A lot of similar Pokemon, right? Incin, Flutter, Urshifu, right? 3 different Pokemon. That's so half. Not exactly, but different grass type now with Amoonguss. And he also has the double Genie core. So this team is quite different in a way. So Tornadus is kind of the main standout because his other team had the Trick Room but not a Tailwind option. Tornadus here really enables the Urshifu really well with Rain Dance with certain strikes. We all know how strong it is back in previous regulations. You can easily sweep through teams with that. And also gives the rest of the team really proper speed control. Like this Flutter Mane here is booster special attack. This Mane, it usually gets outspit by Chen-Pao, opposing Flutters, Choice Scarf Mons. So Tornadus here really enables this booster special attack Flutter Mane. It also really enables this Landorus, right? It's a modest Landorus, so it does definitely need some kind of proper speed control to outspeed things it otherwise can't, and that Tailwind's really valuable for that reason. Arenas, like I mentioned earlier, pairs really nicely with that Urshifu there. It's also really nice at kind of being down opposing weathers, mainly like sun stuff, right? You can Rain Dance on like Torkoal or like Sunny Day Torrent or Whimsicots, right? Terragos, because you're not Cobra Cloak, it's Focus Sash here. But I think what's interesting is like, why is it Focus Sash with bulk? Well, because Urshifu is very common in the format, you actually need a little bit bulk to live 252 Surging Adamant. So with 36 HP and 12 defense here, you do live Surging Strikes most times. That's the whole idea behind it. I'd say very basic for the most part. Mentioned a little bit earlier, but Flutter Mane, it's very good, right? I think now that we're back into this format, Flutter Mane is going to be one of the more dominant ones. You would see Flutter Mane, Instant Urshifu on majority of teams, right? As it's just one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. Just having that Fairy typing to pressure Urshifu and Raging Bolt is very valuable. With Terra Fairy and that booster energy, you are also a lot more flexible. Like Choice Specs can also do the same thing, but Protect and Bulk allows you to kind of play this Flutter Mane more safely, right? You also have a lot of ways to support this Flutter with Incin here and Amoonguss with Fake Out and Redirection. So that's very valuable. Amoonguss here is also really interesting because it's a Sludge Bomb set. Sludge Bomb is not very commonly seen. It did win EUIC as well, but most of the Amoonguss you see nowadays are like Pollen Puff, right? Or maybe you see like Clear Smog instead of that over Sludge Bomb. But Sludge Bomb allows us to kind of be more of an attacker, right? It does a little bit better into Raging Bolt, especially after the Terra Fairy to hit them. And it just does more damage all around. Poison's also really valuable. If you ever get a Sludge Bomb Poison, that adds up over time. Even if you want to Spore it, Sludge Bomb Poison's still like a good status, right? And yeah, I think Redirect is really valuable on this team because, like I said, Flutter Mane really wants it, Landorus really likes it, and also Urshifu sometimes can get really vulnerable, but Amoonguss here protects it really, really well. Incin, this is classic, right? It's just a safety goggle set to respect Amoonguss, and again, it's a really good support piece because the rest of the pieces are very like offensive. So Incin Amoonguss is a really good like defensive backbone. Lando's here. Modest makes sense because he's Tailwind, and also like Lando has still a pretty good speed set in Modest. With Modest here, you still outspeed things like Adamant or Urshifu that are not Choice Scarf, for example. So I think that's still really nice. Also outspeeding things like Modest Chiyu, right? I really do like the Terra Steel subset. I actually use this as well for Knoxville regionals, where I top 8 with this actually same Terra Steel Lando set. And I think sub is very valuable because you can dodge a lot of different moves like Fake Out, like Spore. And I think that's really valuable for Landorus because Landorus is not the bulkiest Pokemon, but behind a sub, you make this guy a really big threat and a little bit harder to KO, right? I think it's interesting is that Wolfe Rainand's Torn, I think you would expect something like Sandseer Storm, but I think again, like Substitute allows you to play a lot safer, and Sandseer is not always consistent. I think when you look at this team, I don't think you're always gonna get the Rainans plus Tailwind pins, and that's why I think like Sandseer doesn't always fit. So Sub allows it to kind of like it's easier position than Sandseer. That's really it. Also, Wolfe is a player that tends to like more consistent options from what I've seen. Terra Steel, just really good defensive Terra. You resist stuff like Ice Beam, which I think is pretty big. That's the main reason why I like Terra Steel Lando when I was running it, because with Terra Poison, you get the extra damage from Sludge Bomb, but it's a little bit worse defensively as you want to be resisting Ice. Articuno did win a regional in this regulation, and Porygon usage was also kind of rising, so Terra Steel was kind of nice in that regard. And yeah, Stam Urshifu stuff that he ran last time, I think it's funny because it's like you do have Tornadus, so I guess like you could argue about not making a Choice Scarf, but Choice Scarf allows you to run this guy like outside of Tail One as well. So yeah, still pretty good option here. Next year we got Japan Balance. Brady Smith got second place with this at Vancouver Regionals, but it wasn't just Brady, right? This is probably by far the quote-unquote most popular team of the regulation. There's a lot of different variants you can run of Raging Belt Balance. This was kind of popularized by the Japanese, who are doing really well with it in grassroots tours and the online scene there, in grand challenges and such. And it's basically built around this Incineroar Raging Bolt core, and Raging Bolt with Calm Mind and Leftovers is very, very hard to KO. And I mean very hard. This thing does not die. There are some endgames where Raging Bolt games will come down a timer because of how long they would take. But yeah, like what makes it so strong is that Fairy type in general is just really hard to pin. There's not many mons that can really hit Terra Fairy outside of, I guess, like Landorus and such, right? And then the thing is, like, you have a lot of ways to remove the things Raging Bolt does like Landorus, right? You have the Scarf Urshifu here to remove Lando, and also Chen Pao here, right? So a very strong offensive mode with Chen Pao Urshifu, and then Raging Bolt Incineroar can kind of just like matchup check everything else because you kind of outstat everything, right? So not really much to talk about the Incineroar guys. We already know what they do. It's just like when you have double fake out plus support, it's really good enabling some kind of setup sweeper, like a Calm Mind mon, like the Calm Mind Flare that Wolf had, or the Swords its Ogerpon. In this case, it's the Raging Bolt that doesn't die. Landorus is also a standout in Regulation F. I think there's a lot more Landoruses than usual. Just because Landorus is just really strong. It hits a lot of the popular Pokemon, like Incin, like Raging Bolt. Those are kind of the main ones, right? There's a few other ones as well, but like those are kind of the main ones. Ground Stab is just very valuable. This one's Terra Poison here, just to have that extra damage to Sludge Bomb. I do think Terra Steel can also work. And yeah, substitute for the same reason like I mentioned with the Wolf team. And yeah, like, I think that as the regulation went on, there were a lot of different variants of this. Tim Edwards actually made finals with a variation of this. He did have Raging Bolt Incineroar still, but his other pieces were quite different. I believe he had Ogerpon, Heartflame, and a Fluttermane on the slot. So a lot of ways you build around it, but Raging Bolt Incineroar are kind of the main core. This is the main stuff you will see. The rest of how you build it kind of depends on the matchups you want to beat with them, right? But yeah, this is like by far the strongest quote-unquote bounce team in the formats. Next here is Nils Dunlop's EUIC winning team. And yeah, this was interesting because I don't think P2 Ursa was actually kind of like, it wasn't very common. I think Nils had a really great call into EUIC because ground damage, like I mentioned for Landorus, is very, very valuable. Ursuluna is something similar. It's very strong physical ground damage. The only tricky part is it's kind of hard to position. Ursuluna is a mon that really appreciates speed control. And one of the best ways to get speed control for Ursuluna is Trick Room. And that's where Porygon comes in, right? Porygon is a very bulky Trick Room setter. It did have some results going into this format, but not many with the Ursuluna Pokemon overall. And Nils gave Ursuluna also its first win, funny enough. Yeah, so this Porygon here is interesting. It's Terra Flying, Terra Blast. But the main reason why it's Terra Flying is because you want an Earthquake next to a Flying type guy, and this is where the Terra Fly is from here, right? Terra Flying Blast is also really good because it hits stuff that Ursuluna doesn't really appreciate, like Urshifu, like Rillaboom, grass types in general that resist EQ and Headlong, right? So Terra Blast is good for that. I'm using Ice Beam as well, but stab here. So yeah. And yeah, Porygon kind of just doesn't die. You have a lot of good support to kind of set up Trick Room. Like a popular game plan you can do to set up Trick Room is like Incin P2 with like Ursula in the back, right? This Incineroar is also quite interesting. It's actually the Citrus Berry set. But I do like Citrus quite a bit because I think you actually have a lot of good Among Us kind of play where you don't need goggles. Flame Orb Ursaluna here means if you burn yourself, you can't get put to sleep. Amoonguss here is also natural spore immunity, and Fluttermane here has substitute. So this kind of frees the incinerate item, and Citrus Berry will proc more often or not if you're not facing Amoonguss, right? You also have Terra Grass just in case. That also plays around a little bit more. Fluttermane here, it was booster special attack like Wolves, but it's not set up. Substitute here is quite valuable, like I mentioned. Blocking Spore is really nice. Also, like, Fluttermane behind sub is really hard to move, especially with the support you have. Ensign to kind of set this up with it, and also the Amoonguss or Radar hits, and if Fluttermane can spam attacks behind a substitute, which is really cool. Urshifu here is choice curve, just to give you some all-around better speed tiers, because this seems actually relatively pretty slow. Ensign, Amoonguss, Ursula, and Porygon are very slow Pokemon, so they all kind of rely on Trick Room. So Urshifu doesn't need that and can kind of play around that. Also, Fluttermane, while it's still very fast, the fact that it's not a booster speed or a timid set means it's actually undersped by a lot of different things. So Urshifu here is able to kind of patch that weakness, right? So what makes this team so strong is it actually has a really good Raging Bolt balance matchup. If you see EUIC finals, it was really hard for Tim to break this Ursaluna. So yeah, one of the best Trick Room teams in the format. Very, very strong. Next here we have Tio, Articuno's Urtrick winning team. And this seems funny, right? It has Articuno. One thing I'll say about Articuno is that it's also really good versus bounce cores. Some of the most popular bounce cores right now have Rillaboom, Raging Bolt, and Lando Eye. Ice types hit all of that, right? And when you have spread ice damage, that's very strong, paired with Ninetales. And this is coming off Specs Blizzard, which is very strong after you kind of add on all the multipliers. So Choice Specs Blizzard, paired with Terra Ice, can actually get a lot of a one hit or two hit KOs, right? And the bulk on this thing is actually really good as well. Ice types got a buff this gen where they get defense boosts in snow, right? And not just that, Articuno also has snow cook ability. So with the defense boost, with the invasion boost, and behind Aurora Veil, it is really hard to actually hit this Articuno or actually do reasonable damage into it. And all you need is ice damage on it, because actually Articuno does not have really great coverage. But yeah, Blizzard's really good at that spread ice damage. Freeze Dry hits stuff like Ogre Pond Water and Urshifu. Ice Beam's more consistent damage, let's say you're hitting things outside of snow. And Sheer Coat, it's a last-ditch effort versus very slow Pokemon. It's really nice to click in Sheer Coat in some situations, just like let's say like a Iron Defense Registeel, right? Or something really bulky that Blizzard naturally wouldn't get. You can just click Sheer Coat on, and it's prey. 30% is not very high, but it's a last-ditch effort after all. Ninetales, it's mainly here kind of set up for Articuno. That's kind of when usually when I bring these guys together tend to. Helping Hand also boosts Articuno to the next level. So Choice Specs, Terra Ice Blizzard with Helping Hand can actually get knockouts. It's actually very, very strong. And yeah, Terra Fire is pretty cool. Terra Fire it's a nice defensive Terra for all the Orcabon Heart Flames in the current format. Arcanine, Husui, not one you see every day, but it's actually quite good. Rock damage is good versus all the Heart Flames and Incineroar in the format. And the way you support this Arcanine is quite good, as you have Orcapon Wellspring that beats some of Arcanine's weaknesses, like the ground types and Urshifu, kind of the main one, right? Also have the Raging Bolt to do really well into Urshifu as well. And Raging Bolt has a really bad ground weakness, but again, you have a lot of ways to kind of beat these ground types with the double ice here, right? This one is not the setup set. This is because Calm Raging Bolt really needs a lot of support like Incinerilla, so AV is a more consistent way of just trading damage, and just like also it gives you good speed control, because this team doesn't have Tailwind. Electro Webs allows you to kind of play the speed in your favor if needed, right? And Little Eye here, again, it's that standard Terra Steel subset, but it is really good for a reason. I kind of mentioned all the pros of it earlier. And yeah, the kill seems interesting. It didn't really see any crazy results after the tournaments, but I still think like the fact that Articuno won a regional is worth mentioning. It also had a top 8 in periods of that same regional. He actually played in the mirror. His building group had to play in top 8, and one of them actually won the whole thing, right? So I thought that was pretty cool. James Evans. James Evans probably has the most consistent Gouging Fire team in the format. So he won Vancouver Regionals with Gouging Fire King Gambit. And Gouging Fire is a really interesting Pokemon. It's a Pokemon that only really shined in Regulation F because of its particular move kits. He crashes a very strong fire move. And with Howl, you're not only boosting yourself to make these Heat Crashes stronger, but you're also supporting all your other physical attackers. Mainly King Gambit, Rillaboom, and Orcapon Wellspring. If you guys any of you guys a Howl, they start to do really respectable damage. Especially like this King Gambit. Howl plus Swords Dance makes these guys really, really strong, right? Gouging Fire also has a really good supporting kit with Breaking Swipe and Burning Warlock, right? So Breaking Swipe to, of course, lower the attacks of the opponents, And Burning Bulwark is it just protect, right? But any physical attacks that hit it will burn it. So that's also really good utility. Terror Fairy, it's just good defensive terror, mostly for the opposing dragons. You actually fire mirrors. That's actually one thing where Terror Fairy is nice. And also, like, again, Raging Bolt. That's kind of a big one nowadays, right? So, yeah. King Gambit, I mentioned it earlier. Again, it's really good at the Howl support, but Sword Stance King Gambit is really strong in the red scenarios, especially with the red support. So you fake out support to set the Sword Stance, you also follow me, right? And Terror Dragon is a really good defensive Terra because Terror Dark is something you would have seen earlier in the formats, but Terror Dark is just so easy to pin. With Urshifu being so common, you want a white to resist water and not be weak to fighting, right? So having that water resist with Terror Dragon is really good. And you don't resist fighting, but at least you're not getting KO'd by close combat anymore. So that's like kind of the main perk. Other ways to deal with Urshifu with this team, of course, is the Miracle Seed Gorilla, so Aggressive Glide will kill Scarf Ursh. And you also have a Specs Flutter main, right, to also remove all the scary fighting types that King doesn't really appreciate. I think Rillaboom is still kind of mandatory on all these King Gambit comms because it's kind of similar to Regular H. I mentioned this before, but you want a way to always get your priority on your favorite King Gambit. In this format too, Indeedee, female, plus like Iron Crown was a thing. So Rillaboom able to overwrite that makes King Gambit a lot more playable, right? Flutter main, just a standard choice spec set. I know James actually had a much bulkier set, but this one here is kind of filler. You can kind of do whatever you want with choice spec Flutter. I think this is actually the first specs Flutter we kind of mentioned here in the video. But choice spec Flutter can kind of go a few different ways in this format. You can either go like max speed timid with like a lot less bulk and a lot more special attack, or you can go even a lot slower with a lot more bulk and less special attack, right? Kind of depends on what you want to do with this thing. And I think I'll leave it to preference up to you guys for how you want to use Flutter main. Ogerpon Wellspring, quite interesting on this team, but yeah, redirection is very valuable at supporting mostly King Gambit and Landorus, right? Landorus appreciates a guy to beat Urshifu for it, right? And it's just all around good support because I think this team is actually really offensive. You kind of want a way to kind of have like a reliable bulky attacker, right? And yeah, Landorus, it's still very good, right? Landorus in this is sort of his main way to beat Raging Bolt balance because in his final set, it's actually looking kind of a little bit rough, but the combination of Flutter, Orlando, Rillaboom, I think Gouging or Wellspring was his way to kind of beat it. So yeah, very, very strong mon, and you're going to see Landorus in a lot of teams here just because it checks the whole format very, very well. Next here, we have Florian's team, and Florian won Dortmund Regionals with Life Orb, Ursulina, Blood Moon. So I have Florian here because I won a regional, but also like I think this is actually one of the better Blood Moon teams in the format. We did see a lot of tail in Blood Moon in the beginning, but that archetype kind of fell off a cliff after that. It had a few other results, but nothing as grand since Charlotte Regionals, and I think Trick Room to enable up Ursulina Blood Moon is more consistent, right? Also because Fergraph is sort of like Ferrig with Ursulina and Trick Room is very valuable, and not just that. You also have a reliable other mode with the Urshifu and the Specs Flutter, right? Because I think with the Tornado stuff, it's all volatile because you're relying on Bleakwind misses, or Bleakwind can miss, and that's not great. And also, like, it's a lot more read heavy. I think this is kind of a more balanced take on it, just to reliably get Trick Room and sweep under Trick Room more consistently, right? Because you have Instant to set up the Trick Room reliably, and you also have, like, Follow Me such, right? So, yeah. But yeah, Ursulina Blood Moon, because we don't have Tailwind, there's not really much need for speed. 244 here gives you the Life Orb optimization with max special attack. Max special attack is kind of required, so you can KO everything with Life Orb Blood Moon with Terra Normal. 12 speed is just kind of for mirrors. I don't think min speed you can also go for, but I don't think there's really a point because if you go min speed, you still get undersped by opposing Hisuian or Sutter min speed, right? So 12 here is kind of just like still underspeeding most things while also not underspeeding every Ursulina Blood Moon because like in the mirror. You want to be faster, so you can play out of Trick Room usually, because everything else doesn't really appreciate Trick Room completely. Your Trick Room mode's mostly just going instant Frig Ursa in versus the teams that can't handle Trick Room stuff, but oftentimes you can play this out of Trick Room with the Flutter main Urshifu, right? Ogerpon here is kind of mandatory. You're going to see like both Ogerpon forms a lot here, Wellspring and Heartflame. But Wellspring here is really good support. Allows you to get Trick Room up safely. It also protects your Blood Moon because sometimes your Blood Moon gets caught in certain scenarios and you need redirected hits for it to live, right? It also gives you a Spore immunity. I think Ursulina Blood Moon teams tend to be a little Spore weak, especially if you set Trick Room and Among Us on the field. So having this guy next to Among Us to block Spore is very valuable. Instant is pretty interesting. It's actually the Throat Chop set. So Throat Chop is kind of cool because you can actually block parting shots. So I think the idea is like you can throw chop something on a trick room so they can't parting shot your Ursa if needed, right? Or just stopping parting shot in general. So that part's kind of cool. For Ring, it's the passive set, but I'm not a huge fan of this set completely, but for an Ursa and a Life 4 Blood Moon team, I think that's kind of required because it allows your Blood Moon to kind of just get every single knockout. There's also a lot of good Helping Hand partners. Helping Hand, Wicked Blow, of course, coming for your Urshifu here, and also Helping Hand like Terra Fairy, Moonblast from Fluttermane, right? That's also very valuable. And yeah, Flutter Urshifu is kind of here for better speed control, speed answers, because the rest of the team is like actually quite slow. So yeah. But yeah, strongest, I think, Ursula and Blood Moon team in the format, in my opinion. Next thing we have is Toler Webb's Knoxville winning team. And he actually took this from Edu, who top 4 regional. And I think this team is quite interesting because it has a Goldango on it. And I think Goldango is a mon that many thought were like kind of power crept in a way. Like, you know, you see a lot of Regulation H, right? It's a lower power level format, but Goldango has a busted spread move, really good nasty pawn setup. But there's a lot more Goldango counterplay, I would say, in Regulation F, but it's still very good in its own right, especially paired with the right support. And Toler's team here has a lot of support. Again, Incineroar to fake out plus nasty pot, follow me for your redirect, and a Tailwind support I think is really key on it. Tailwind on the Tornades here enables not just the Goldango, but also enables the Urshifu very well. Unseen Fist ignores Protect. You can't sell a Tailwind, so Tailwind plus Wicked Blow, very good, right? But the way that Toler has built this Tornado is very interesting. He made it modest. So with modest, the Bleakwind Storm's actually set to add up a lot. There's like a lot of respectable damage. And that chip damage over time puts in a range of stuff like Wicked Blow and like make it rain for the end games, right? But yeah, overall though, it's still mostly there for Tailwind as the speed control on this team is a little bit limited outside of that. So that does appreciate that because the Goldango on this team is very slow. But because you have Tailwind, you can afford to have run less speed, run more bulk and attack, and sweep when you can, right? But yeah, going back to more Goldango, like why Goldango, right? Goldango, Terra Fairy setup, I think is just kind of the highlight of this format, right? We see the Terra Fairy setup with Raging Bolt. We saw the Calm Mind Flutter, right? The Terra Fairy Photograph of the Fruit Spray Hyper Voice, right? Goldango is kind of similar. It's with defensive Terra Fairy and setup, you kind of beat Raging Bolt pretty well. You can stall Thundercut completely and just click Nasty Pot over and over again and sweep. And you'll also support, like I said, you mentioned how to do it, support it well to sweep. And yeah, it's just very good, very consistent mon. And I think the weight support is really valuable. And because you have Goldango, it gives you also a Spore immunity, which is very valuable in this format. Amoonguss can be problematic for these kind of teams. And yeah, because you have a lot of Amoonguss hates, you can afford to run the Citrus Berry on Incineroar. Citrus Terra Grass is kind of a classic when you have enough Amoonguss answers, right? Citrus also procs more often than not. Terra Grass is for extra Amoonguss counterplay, but it's also really good versus Rapid Strike and Wellspring. Adamant set here, but really bulky. I think the idea is with all the speed control, you don't need a whole lot of speed on the Ensign, right? And you like I think that's the whole point of Toler's EVs. Like you can kind of maximize your bulk more because you have Tailwind support if needed. Wellspring here, you're gonna see a lot of Wellspring and Heartflame in this format. It's just singly the best Ogerpon performance in the format. Wellspring's kind of more known for its defensive kit though, as it's a little bit better suited at dealing with Rapid Strike more often, and just like water damage is good to kind of check some of Goldango's weaknesses as well. Goldango doesn't really appreciate Lando Eye or Incineroar, which Wellspring can hit a little bit harder, right? AV Raging Bolt because you don't really have enough support to. I mean, you wouldn't really run Incin Rilla. Well, there's no Incin or there's no Rillaboom here to support the Raging Bolt. It was Calm Mind, right? But usually you wouldn't see Calm Mind Raging Bolt with Nasty Pot Goldango always, right? So AV is a little bit more consistent, gives you a more kind of a special wall, and the way Toler was playing his Raging Bolt is really interesting. The Snarl is really good for damage negation, which allows, again, your Goldango to set up even more often. Again, Terra Fairy, probably single-handedly, probably one of the best Terras in this format, as it is so good versus opposing Raging Bolt. And also, forgot to mention, Single Strike. Terra Fairy, you resisting Wicked Blow and close combat is very valuable, right? This Urshifu was pretty interesting. I believe this 20 defense here was to live Surging and Rain for the Rain matchup, he said. And yeah, he thought that was important to make it easier. And besides that, it's a very standard Ursh. And the only reason why you went Single Strike instead of Rapid is because you don't want to overlap the typings, as he already has the Wellspring here. So Single Strike is very valuable. And also, it still gets some good pins, right? Being able to force into Terra Fairy, because Fairy resists Dark and Fighting, right? But if you force into Terra Fairy, then Make It Rain becomes more valuable. So I get the synergy with that as well, with the gold here. But yeah, one of the strongest gold teams in the format. All right, so next we have 7 Maya's Charlotte team. And this is probably the strongest hyper offense team in my format, in my opinion. I know I mentioned earlier how I wasn't really huge on the Ursula and Bloodmoon talent stuff because I think it fell off more in usage, but seven teams here kind of stayed more consistent after his top cut here. I believe he top cut several other regionals at Orlando and a European regional. And it's really just how well this tornado supports all these strong attackers, right? So I believe Stefan's version actually had Rocky Helmet for Protect, but there was one that also had Taunt and Covert Cloak, which also top cut, and I think that's a preference piece, right? Obviously, if you're not Cloak, you need Protect probably, and like Rocky Helmet probably fine. And but like what I really like about Cloak and Taunt is you can dodge Fake Out because there's so much instant real in the format, and you can stop setup, right? Stopping Trick Room and stopping setup all around is really valuable in my opinion. Also stopping Among Us, that's a big one. But yeah, Tailwind for all your guys, Bleak Wind as your main attack, and Sunny Day enables a lot of your Pokemon, mainly the Chi-Yu, right? So Sunny Day plus Heat Wave or Overheat will get massive KOs. I don't think there's many Pokemon like if you don't resist it, you are dying to that, right? But Sunny Day also has some other benefits as it does weaken the damage of Pokemon like Urshifu Rapid Strike, and also is good for rain matchups all around. So in the rain matchup, you the Pranks or Sunny Day, you completely kind of auto win the rain matchup. I'm hitting you with that. So yeah, Chi-Yu, we kind of talk about that. It's just a really strong guy. Abuses Sunday really well, abuses Tailwind really well. It also benefits a lot of your special attackers, right? You have a few other special attackers besides Torn here. Flutter Mane's the big one, and Glamora, right? Beats of Ruin with Meteor Beam probably gets a lot of KOs as well. And Beats of Ruin Moonblast also, again, the damage will start to add up. Flutter Mane is your secondary form of speed control and also secondary kind of attacker. But yeah, Icy Wind is sort of a way to have your Chi-Yu, Ogerpon, or Glamora here outspeed things you need to outside of Tailwind, right? It's also like allows you to kind of beat Tailwind mirrors more reliably, because in Tailwind, sometimes facing other fast Pokemon is really annoying. But with your own faster guy with Icy Wind and you match Tailwind, it allows you to kind of always win that speed war, right? So that part's really valuable. Wellspring, because every hyper offense team needs a little defensive backbone. Otherwise, your team is just paper and will fold to any kind of neutral hit. So I really like Wellspring here to follow me away attacks that most of your free Pokemon here don't appreciate. And again, it's mostly like also an Urshifu check. Urshifu Rapid Strike can be scary for a team like this if you're not careful. So with the Follow Me Water Absorb and a Sunday Torrent and all the speed control, you kind of invalidate Urshifu even more, right? And yeah, Single Strike, kind of mentioned like you want to validate Urshifu as much as possible. Because you already have the Water type in here, Rapid Strike is a little like redundant, and also you have Sunny Day, which also means Rapid Strike does a little bit less damage. So Wicked Blow here does a lot of consistent damage. Also, again, forcing out those Fairy Terras for your Glamora here. Very valuable. And yeah, Glim, besides being a really strong special attacker, I think that Poison types in general, Poison Stab, is really good at hitting the Terra Fairies, Terra Fairy Bolt, Terra Fairy whatever, right? Meteor Beam, Chaos Incineroar, the best support Pokemon in the formats. And with Toxic Debris, I think after Toxic Debris, Toxic Spike's damage really racks up for a team like this, because certain KOs you can't get, you will definitely get after a Pokemon gets Toxic down on. So I think that part's pretty cool. But yeah, this is by far the strongest hyper offense team in the current format, in my opinion. Next we have Justin Karras, and it's sort of a hyper offense team as well, but it's sort of like a bulky offense team. You have a Psyspam mode, right, and you have a lot of like bulky redirectors to support a lot of strong attackers here, right? So I guess we gotta start off the Iron Crown. Iron Crown is not a mon we see often, but it's pretty cool in this format as Expanded Force hits a lot of things, like mainly Urshifu, and you have the Tacking Cutter to hit all the Fairy types in the format, mainly Flutter Mane and the Terra Fairy Rage Bolts, like I mentioned, because you have a lot of ways to also kind of beat down the Raging. This Regidrago here is also not a mon you see often, but Regidrago is really good at forcing Dragons to Terra, and also Dragon Energy kind of nukes the field. You KO a lot of neutral things. You definitely nuke Urshifu. You do really well into Incineroar, especially with the DD and Orcapon support. Just allows your Regidrago to deal massive damage. Regidrago, though, is not the fastest Pokemon, so that's why you have a Tailwind mode here. Tailwind enables the Regidrago a lot, and also a lot of your other strong attackers, like Orcapon and Iron Crown here. Also has the Rain Dance to enable your Urshifu even more, and to, again, shut down opposing weather stuff. Same Tornado Sport as Wolf, because I think Living Surgeon Strikes is quite important. In DD here, it's your first redirector and main way to set up terrain to support your Iron Crown, right? That's kind of the whole synergy here. Follow Me plus Expanding Force, Helping Hand plus Expanding Force, Helping Hand plus Terra Blast stuff is very valuable, right? He also has Trick Room to make the speeds in his favor when he can't do Tailwind stuff, right? Maybe you want to Trick Room on a Tailwind person, or just yeah, it's just for general stuff because like all around it's a very fast team, but Trick Room is kind of a last ditch thing, right? Because like for the most part you're really clicking Follow Me Helping Hand, but there's some cases where Trick Room will be valuable, right? Ogre One Heart Flame, again, it's a really strong tail and abuser. Also gives you a secondary Spore immunity, which is really good for these kind of offensive comps because you always want to respect the Mungus. I mean, that's really valuable. And yeah, Okarpon does massive damage into Pokemon that Reggie Draco and I sometimes don't appreciate, mainly Steel types. So Urshifu is also there for that reason. Ivy Cudgel and Close Combat hitting Steel types that your Dragon is like a type can't hit nearly as well, right? And Urshifu here, one of the best Pokemon in the game. You also have a lot of ways to kind of get around some of the priority. I think that's where NDD Female is really valuable. I mentioned this earlier. Urshifu, Wolf, the Choice Scarf doesn't appreciate Fake Out or Thunderclap. That's why Wolf had Fergaraf. In this case, Justin Karas has NDD Female, not just for the Grind Crown, but it supports other guys from dodging Fake Out here. So yeah, really cool team. I know a few other European players did well with this outside Justin Karas to top cuts. And I think sometimes you see like Lando Eye in these kind of comps, but like this is like one of the highest placement teams of Iron Crown Psyspam, so I thought it was worth a mention here. And lastly, I have Ting Dozo, and this is an archetype that saw a lot of usage towards the end of Regulation F. This top 8 EUIC, and this was popularized by the Japanese. I believe Ursa Bm did really well in it was either the Grand Challenge or some kind of grassroots. But anyways, the point was, innovative by the Japanese teams are good, and it did really well at EUIC. It probably could have made it further too. I believe he got a little unlucky in his top 8 set. So yeah, what makes this team so strong? So Ting Dozo, very hard to remove, right? So the general idea is you can usually lead Ting Lu and Dozo in most matchups. You can yawn and sand tube things, Ruination Chip, and then you clean up with your strong attackers at back, like Chen-Pao plus Gouging, Dragonite plus Chen-Pao, or Goldango, right? Goldango is kind of important for these kind of Ting Lu Dozo teams because these teams tend to be really weak to Spore, and Goldango gives you a way to beat Among Us. So I think that part's pretty important, right? You always want a Spore immunity on almost any team. So Goldango does that. Terra Fairy, same reason I mentioned earlier, does a really good defensive Terra for the Dragons, like Raging Bolt, for Urshifu Single Strike, right? Terra Fairy Dazzle is also kind of cool. I know most of the Goldangos I've shown so far were not choice specs. They were like the setup ones. Terra Fairy Dazzle, though, is really good at damaging a lot of the key threats, all those fighting types, all those dragon types, right? So yeah. Gouging Fire, you can howl a lot of different things here. The team is primarily physical outside Goldango, right? So you howl all these other guys for damage, also boost yourself, and Howl is really nice for mainly his Dragonite, because his Dragonite is Inner Focus and Scale Shot. This is actually, if you thought Scale Shot Dragonite was gone, well, it was a thing. It was not just a Regulation H thing. It was a thing back in Regulation F. I think that's the first appearance we actually saw Scale Shot DNF be popular-ish. And yeah, this is the first case of it. With Inner Focus as well, this guy cannot get intimidated. And I think that's kind of smart because there was so much double fake out in the format. So yeah, Howl, with the Inner Focus and Scale Shot stuff, you can kind of snowball a lot of different teams. Ironhead is kind of mandatory in this format because of how common Flutter Mane is. You can kind of get away with mono Scale Shot nowadays in Regulation H because there's way less fairy types. But when Flutter Mane is like 60-70% usage, you kind of need a way to hit it, right? So Ironhead's pretty important to Terra Steel to resist it as well. You're also good versus like Chen-Pao and such. So yeah. But yeah, like also like, yeah, with Scale Shot as well, you can also get around Focus Stats and Chen-Pao, and I think that's the main reason why I started rising usage. It's the kind of same logic why you run Loaded Dice to kill Sneasler. You kill some of the Sash mods like Chen-Pao here with the Loaded Dice Scale Shots in Reg F. Ting Lu, I already mentioned, it pairs really nicely with the Dozo. Sand Tomb is really annoying, Ruination is annoying, and also Vessel Ruined helps out your team a lot. It makes the Dragon a lot bulkier. You don't have multi-scale, right? So the Vessel Ruined here helps you a lot. And yeah, that's like the standard Ting Lu Dozo team of the format. It didn't see like a whole lot of play early from it, but I think going back to Reg F, I can definitely see this team rise more in usage as it had a really high appearance in EUIC, and it also had top 16 placement at Orlando, the last regional of Reg F. So yeah. But yeah, that is my list of the top returning teams in Regulation F in my opinion. I'm definitely missing some other ones because there's a lot of other great teams, but I think these are the ones that stood out to me the most, and I think these are the ones that are most likely to see some more play going back into format when we have in next month. So yeah. But yeah, we'll definitely have some more Regulation F videos. One that went out a little bit earlier because I am going to Vegas and LIC, so I won't be able to release another video in a hot minute. So hopefully that goes well there, and I'll maybe do like one last Regulation H video after that. But yeah, starting Reg F a little early, and hope these teams will be good for you to ladder with, because now it's you can play on ladder now. So yeah. But yeah, that'll be for today. I'll catch you later. Goodbye.